Good evening, friends. Welcome to the Berkshire Eagle debate between the two candidates seeking election to be your state representative for the 3rd Berkshire District in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. I'm Kevin Moran, Executive Editor of the Berkshire Eagle and moderator for tonight's debate. Thank you to Shakespeare and Company for the use of this wonderful space, and welcome and thank you to our friends at Community Television for the Southern Berkshires, who are recording tonight's event for later broadcast on CTSB, and they also generously shared their recording so it can be viewed on berkshireeagle.com. Election Day is Tuesday, November 5th. Polling places are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you cannot vote on November 5th in person, early voting starts on Saturday, October 19th, and you'll need to check with your town with regard to the times and locations for early voting. The vote by mail application deadline is October 29th, and if you're not yet registered to vote, you have until October 26th to register. And I want to thank you for all of you for coming tonight, and to those who are watching at home. It's wonderful to see you all here, and I expect that you will all withhold your applause and outbursts during the debate itself. I promise you, I will invite you to applaud when the time is right. Tonight, the Berkshire Eagle has invited the two candidates to their first and only debate of the campaign, and I invite you to listen and to hear what they have to say. With that, please join me in giving a warm welcome as we invite our candidates to join me and have a seat on our stage. Allow me to introduce Leigh Davis, to my immediate right, the Democratic candidate from Great Barrington, and Marybeth Mitz, to my far right, the independent candidate from Lenox. Welcome to you both, and thank you. The candidates have agreed to the format ahead of time. I will pose questions, and each candidate will have up to a minute and a half to answer. And then each candidate will have half a minute to follow up or offer a rebuttal. I will be running the clock, and if we go over here and there, I'll do my best to provide the extra time to the other candidate. At the beginning, before we gathered on stage, a coin was flipped. Leigh Davis won the coin toss, and she opted to give her 2-minute closing statement last. That means Marybeth will go first with her 2-minute closing statement, and Leigh will close with her 2-minute closing statement. That means that Marybeth got to choose her seat position on stage. Rather than having opening arguments, we're just going to get right into the questions. But before we start, I would like to acknowledge and congratulate the current office holder, the state representative who's represented this district proudly and faithfully for 22 years, Mr. William Smitty Pignatelli. Please join me in giving State Representative Smitty Pignatelli a round of applause for his public service. Thank you, and we will get going here. I have set my timer. The big timer is for the main time, and my little timer is for the rebuttals. That said, do you want to do a mic check?
Test. Hello?
There we go.
I'm very loud.
That's all right. All right, we've got some good questions. I really think they're pretty decent questions. And I'm going to start with a little bit of Shakespeare. It seems appropriate. Uneasy lies the head that wears a crown, says the king in Shakespeare's Henry IV. On Tuesday, November 5th, Americans head to the polls to choose a new president, new members of Congress, and a host of down-ballot races, new members, including your own. Many citizens are highly concerned, some would say frightened, about what our democracy will look like whether it will hold, whether there will be a peaceful transfer of power. On November 6th, one of you will be the state representative-elect of the 3rd Berkshire District. And your constituents will look to you to provide the leadership and wherewithal to help guide them and our democracy forward. What will you say? What will your counsel be to them, those anxious voters, on November 6th? What will you plan to console them or congratulate them to those constituents who may be anxious about the outcome of the presidential election? Leigh, you'll get the first answer to this question, and I'm going to start the timer.
So first of all, thank you all for being so engaged and for being here, and thank you to my opponent, Marybeth, and thank you, Kevin, and to the Berkshire Eagle. There is so much riding on this election. Democracy is literally at stake, and I'm so thankful for those that are engaged with presidential elections and with down-ballot elections such as this one. It really takes a leader on the local level to really push through change that we want from our values and from what we want in our community. So that can be from schools, that can be aging in place, but it's so important that the day after the election that we are feeling that we have the leadership with us. And what I bring to this is someone that will be accountable, that will be listening, that has the drive and the leadership to take us into the next session. So I'm happy, and whatever the outcome between us, I'm thrilled. And with the presidential election, I'm going to hold my breath and hope that democracy continues to be strong and accountable and transparent. So there's a lot riding on this election, both locally and from a presidential standpoint. But I'm here to take the leadership in the role of state rep if that's how the voters choose.
Thank you, Leigh. And when you hear that ding, that means your time is up. You were right on the money. And I'm just going to pause it here 1 second, please. And the question goes to you, Marybeth. What will you say, what will your counsel be on November 6th to those constituents who may be anxious about the outcome of the election?
Thank you, Kevin. Well, I would first say that it's really important that we recognize that our democracy is a conversation. People have various opinions, and they should all be respected. So as an independent, I'm happy to move forward in this race. I'm happy if I were to win this race, to engage in that conversation on November 6th, that we should all be in this together. No matter what happens, we need to represent our ideals and our values and continue to work toward making the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as well as our nation, as strong as it can possibly be. There are a lot of challenges ahead. There are climate challenges, economic development challenges, challenges with regard to health and safety within our own community, and those are the ones that we need to be focused on. So while we may have different political opinions, there are still common ground that we all need to engage in. We all expect to have a safe place to live in our communities. So police, fire, and EMS should be top of mind. We all expect to have a nice place to live, a warm home to come home to, and to be able to live comfortably in the Berkshires. And that's what I will continue to fight for.
Thank you. Leigh, you have 30 seconds to add on to
What I will say, thank you, is, Marybeth brought up being an independent, and I am a lifelong Democrat. I have always been a Democrat, and I value that. Having said that, as a state rep, I'm going to be having the same gold standard of constituent services that Smithy had, and it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Independent, or Democrat. But what I will say is that it's very, very important that you have someone that's transparent and that is there for you, and I will be that person.
Marybeth, your turn, and you're going to get a few seconds.
Great. So I'm an independent, but I am very progressive. I will continue to listen to everyone in the 3rd Berkshire District because everyone deserves a voice. Everyone deserves to be represented. I'm going to look out for the values of our community, our Berkshire community, and I will never fail to listen to your concerns, to bring those concerns to the State House and fight for everything that we need to bring resources back here so that we can live our best lives here in the Berkshires. I don't think you have to have a particular party affiliation to do this job very well. And I know that I have a track record that proves that I've done a lot of work here, and I will continue to work for all the residents of the district.
You both have experience in local government, having served on the select board in your respective communities. But come January, you will embark on a steep learning curve, and probably on a backbench, and probably in a basement office somewhere in the bowels of the State House. And that steep learning curve will involve learning a new role as a state representative for 18 communities, several school districts. You'll be learning the idiosyncrasies of the Massachusetts House of Representatives, its leadership, and its committees. And you'll be learning the inner and outer workings of Beacon Hill, while also working to fulfill your commitments to the voters who elected you to represent them. With this in mind, and Marybeth, you get this question first. With this in mind, tell the voters here, what are the skills that you possess that will navigate you up and over that learning curve?
Having been someone who's worked in the federal government and the U.S. military, I have a very good understanding of complex organizations. Being in a municipality, I've been representing all of the issues of my constituents, but to work in a very complex organization and start to learn the intricacies of that is something entirely different. Now, I know that the State House does not have a congressional budget office arm. They don't have a research arm to do the work that needs to be done so that all of the legislators understand what it is they're looking at and voting on. This is an issue. There is a State House organization called InstaTrack that most legislators go to in order to get their information so that they can competently evaluate bills. I understand that understanding all these bills and the intricacies of them is something that will need to be drilled down on. It's important that the next representative can find the resources, do the hard work, make coalitions with other representatives in order to bring back the resources to the Berkshires and in order to be true to our values for what we want to do here in the Berkshires.
That's time. And Leigh, the question goes to you. Tell the voters here, what are the skills you possess that will navigate you up and over that steep learning curve? Time starts now.
So I'm known for building coalitions. I'm known for grassroots organizing, and I'm looking at Pam and a couple folks here that helped me with the local control over horse racing back during my first year as a select board member. So I deeply value team building and being a team player. And the Democrats have the majority at the State House. And with that, in my conversations moving forward the 7 months that I've been campaigning really, really hard, I've had conversations with committee members. And I've talked to people and looked at what is the most valuable way to bring myself into the Third Berkshires and make that connection with Beacon Hill. That comes in the way of being on a committee that is valuable to the Berkshires, whether it's housing, environment, mental health, education, and really having those relationships and having those coalitions and being someone that is willing to learn and willing to speak to others about really how did Smitty have that gold standard of constituent services and balance being a legislator. So I'm going to be doing a lot of learning. I'm going to be doing a lot of coalition building, and I'm going to be pinpointing the committees that I think I will be valuable to the 3rd Berkshire District.
Marybeth, you get a chance. You get 30 seconds to respond here once I get my lovely timer back up to speed here. There we go.
Okay, I faced some adversity here in Lenox in putting up the Brushwood housing project that we fought so hard for 6 years. So I understand conflict. I understand being shut out. I understand having to kind of overcome people's objections and reach a consensus to get something done. I think I did a very admirable job with that, persisting in dealing with the neighbors and dealing with other constituents in town.
Thank you. Leigh, your turn for a rebuttal.
So when I went to Beacon Hill right after the primary election, I met with some folks in House leadership, and they called me a scrappy deliverer of results. And they have been watching me for years and years and years. I didn't know this, but they've been watching my time on the select board. They've been watching my experience as a chair of the housing committee, and they know that I have what it takes to get the job done.
Thank you. This next question goes to Leigh first. The decision to run for office, in this case to be a state lawmaker, is one question that most of us don't consider or make. But you did think about it, and you decided to run for the office of State Representative of the 3rd Berkshire District. What was the thinking that went into your decision? When did you make your decision? Tell us why you decided to run, and what difference will you make?
So I woke up and I read the Berkshire Eagle, and I saw that Smitty had decided not to run again. And I believe it was around my birthday. And it was a big moment in my life. And I talked to my kids and I said, am I ready to do this? And they said, Mom, we're worried about you. You have us gone and you have the cats. We think you should run for state rep. And now being a cat lady is kind of actually a good thing. So I'm now a cat lady and running for state rep. So it all comes to having the instinct and listening to my gut. And my gut tells me I've been doing this job already, and I should be continuing to do this job. I deeply am passionate for community. I'm deeply passionate for the 18 towns that make the 3rd Berkshire, and I think I can do the job. I think I can have a strong voice, that I have the listening skills, that I have the coalition building skills to be of value to this district. So the moment that I decided was really after I talked to my children and I looked at my cats, and I knew deep down that I've been doing a good job as a vice chair of the select board for 5 years. As a chair of the housing subcommittee, I've made movement and change and energy. As a director of development and the director of construct in communications, I've made a valuable impact. So I knew that would be valuable as a 3rd Berkshire rep.
Marybeth, the multiple questions go to you. And what thinking went into your decision to run? When did you make it? Why did you decide to run? And what is the difference that you plan to make?
So I came to this decision after about a month. I'd been on the select board for 5 years. I was the chairman of the Affordable Housing Trust. I had been serving on the school committee for 9 years. I've done a lot for the town of Lenox, and I felt very good about the contributions that I had made. And I thought, well, Smitty's going to step aside. If I want to try to do this, now would be the time. Had a very long discussion with my husband, because I think it's really important that he understand that if I'm going to be driving back and forth to Boston, dinner might be out a little bit more than usual. So, we came to an agreement, and we had talked about this many years before. I had sort of expressed an interest in running for Congress, and I wanted to know he was in with me on that. And he said, yeah, you should totally do this. So reaching that decision, it really took having my partner on board, and I'm so happy that he is. He's been so supportive, and I really feel like I've done a lot for our community in Lenox. I've been on the Lenox Cultural District Committee, helping with arts in the community, the Lenox Cultural Council, and I really want to take it to the next level to try to bring more back to all the 18 towns, not just to the town of Lenox.
Leigh, you get half a minute to respond. Or
So the other thing I meant to say is that public service is in my DNA. This is something that I was actually born and raised in a house full of civil rights activists. My dad created the Martin Luther King Center and the national holiday with Coretta Scott King. My mom worked with Sergeant Shriver, found our Peace Corps, Job Corps, Special Olympics. So I was raised in a house that was giving back, and being a public servant is part of my core.
As a presidential management intern out of graduate school, I started at HUD in Washington, D.C. I found housing to be a national issue. I knew that wherever I went in my career, if I had a knowledge of the housing market, I would be in pretty good shape. When I met my husband and we transferred all over the United States, I got into the Department of Navy. I have been doing public service my entire career.
thank you for answering those questions. This moves on to the next question. And this question goes to Marybeth first. Marybeth, you are running as an independent candidate, and some have criticized you for it, saying you flip-flop on party affiliations and calling into question if you are even fit for the 3rd Berkshire District. How did you come to run as an independent? If elected, do you expect to choose a party affiliation, and if so, to what? Or do you plan to stay independent in the House? And if so, with what party will you caucus as an independent?
Thank you. So I came to this decision quite by accident. I went in to get my papers to run for office. I had re-registered as a Democrat after Super Tuesday because it was my constitutional right to become unenrolled for Super Tuesday and select the person of my choice. And when I went in to get the papers, I found out that a deadline had passed. I didn't know there would be a deadline. So I went back in, got the papers for an independent, and I figured I'm running on my record. Everyone in Berkshire County already knows what I've done for the town of Lenox, and I'm pretty confident that running on my record is going to be adequate. So I took that leap, and if I go to the State House, I will certainly be caucusing with the Democrats because that's the major party. I've spoken to Susanna Whip, who is the other independent, and she caucuses with the Democratic Party. She's very effective for her district in Franklin County, and I believe that I can be effective as an independent, but I could also choose when I get there to become a Democrat, should that be the case. I haven't taken that into account currently, but that's certainly an option.
Leigh, your response to this?
So when I decided to run, the first thing I did was look up, go to the Secretary of Commonwealth's website and look up a pamphlet that says how to run for office. And anyone that is going to take this seriously enough should really look up this website and look at the steps needed to run for office. And almost immediately I saw the deadlines and I made sure I hit each deadline. So whether it was to make sure I was enrolled, whether to declare my candidacy, to make sure I had the right party affiliation that I was comfortable with, I checked the boxes. I made sure that I was hitting the deadlines. And I feel very, very passionate that if you're going to make a decision that is going to impact 40,000 people in a district that you might be representing, that you are paying attention to the deadlines. And if you're going to be a Democrat, you're a proud Democrat, and you have the party behind you, as I do. So it's very, very important that, for me, that I understand Marybeth's thoughts, and I appreciate her explanation, because I really I was confused, to be honest. I didn't quite understand the way that she came about this decision. And what I will say is that as the Democratic nominee, I have the power of the party behind me right now. And, you know, with the endorsement of the governor, with the endorsement of Senator Markey and Warren.
Thank you. That's time, and you'll get a follow-up on this. I want to give half a minute here to Marybeth.
Okay, I think that that argument is a false argument, that by some measure, not meeting a deadline doesn't mean that you're committed to your values and your ideals. So I'm going to go to Boston. I'm going to represent everyone in the 3rd Berkshire District. People know that I'm a fairly progressive candidate. If they know me and they know that my issues are housing, healthcare, and infrastructure, that I'm fairly left-leaning.
Thanks, Marybeth. Leigh,
Sure.
you get to close.
So just to be clear, the reason why I was confused with my opponent's reasoning is that in March, an interview was published that she said that she was running to be an independent to really represent everyone, and she did not say that she was running as an independent because she missed the deadline. So that's where the clarity was missing for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving on to the next question. Leigh, you get this next question first. Leigh, you are running as a Democratic candidate, and you have received the requisite endorsements from many leaders in the party, and you've received thousands of dollars in campaign contributions from many people in the Democrat Party and like-minded organizations. Does this make you beholden to the Democratic Party stances and the money that's been given to you? And you get a minute and a half.
So I've raised about $74,000, $75,000. I've been running a very, very hard-fought campaign for almost 8 months, and I am very, very grateful to have received the endorsements from environmental groups, to animal rights groups, to unions, to the Massachusetts Nurses Association, the AFL-CIO, to reproductive health organizations, Planned Parenthood, Reproductive Equity Now. So I am not beholden to these. These are values that I deeply hold, values that are dear to working families, about living, making a living wage, that ensuring that there's equity, that there's social justice. So these are values that are meaningful to me. So I am not beholden. These are organizations that deeply have watched my campaign, have seen the results that I brought as a vice chair of the select board, as a chair of the housing committee, and they put us through both a very intense process of questionnaires, of panel interviews, and really vetting us. So I am not beholden to any of them. I have about 2% that contributions come from these organizations, so it's really not that much. And majority of them are from unions that deeply, deeply care about what I care about. And what I meant is, working families and reproductive health and so forth.
Marybeth, you get a minute and a half on this.
Okay, so I've raised about $16,000. I'm a little terrible about asking people for money. It's not one of my stronger suits. I figured, again, that if I ran on my record, that would be a very good way to run. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question a little bit?
Yes, the essence of the question to Leigh was,
I've got
does
it
this
now.
make
You
her beholden to Democratic Party stances and the money that's been given to her?
Being someone who has not received any money from any particular groups, I do not feel that I'm in any way tied to any particular interest. I can represent the interests of everyone in Berkshire County. I will not necessarily be representing my own interests. I really need to represent all of yours. I'm going to be there to work for each one of you and each one of your interests. And there's a lot of diversity of need in this county, from agriculture to clean energy to the arts and culture to outdoor recreation and workforce and economic development. I'm going to be focusing on all of that, not the money, not where it comes from. It's all about the public. It's all about the 3rd Berkshire District for me.
Leigh, you get 30 seconds to.
So I haven't received anything from the Democratic Party. The endorsements I received, such as from the governor, from Senator Markey, Senator Warren, these endorsements are, again, they have seen my work and they believe that I bring forth the democratic principles that are so, beholden to us, that are really the heart of why I am running. So just to clear that I'm not beholden to anything, and it's based on the experience and leadership I have brought.
Marybeth.
I'm really proud of the fact that I've got a 65-unit housing development with market rate and affordable housing going up in the town of Lenox that I persisted on personally. I'm very happy that the town of Lenox has a public safety building going up for our police, fire, and EMS that we've been planning for 6 years. I'm very proud of the fact that I'm working on an EMS study for all of South Berkshire County right now to ensure that we have all of the training, materials, and staff for the county.
Thank you very much. The audience is doing a wonderful job here. And why don't we break some of that tension by giving the candidates for a round of applause thus far. Thank you. Things going okay? Good. Okay. Let's move on to the next question, please. Marybeth, this question goes to you first. 18 towns comprise the 3rd Berkshire, making it the largest legislative district in the sense geographically in the House. The Southern Berkshire communities have long shared an identity, economically, socially, circulatorily, educationally, historically, because they are contiguous. In just a couple of years ago, Dalton was added to the 3rd Berkshire District, and it's literally like a northern peninsula to the rest of the district. Marybeth, what is your plan to include or bring Dalton into the fold of this district, while recognizing that Dalton has its own set of issues and challenges? You get a minute and a half.
Great. So, Dalton, like Leigh and Washington and Mount Washington and Sandusfield and Otis, it's like having 18 children with different personalities. They all grow up in the same house, they're all in the same district, but they're different. So I would pay attention to Dalton just like I would pay attention to any of my other children and give them all the attention and the love and care that they need. I've been door knocking a lot. The people in Dalton have been incredibly friendly, just like the people everywhere else. I don't find, I think they probably find that they're a little dislocated from their neighbors from Hinsdale, Peru, and Windsor, because that's where they used to belong. But they've been very receptive. I think it's going to be a great relationship. And I have absolutely no illusions that they're going to need things like a public safety building. They need housing, affordable housing. They need all the same things that the rest of the communities in South Berkshire County need and want. Everyone needs and wants basically the same types of things throughout the county and throughout the Commonwealth. And I want to be that person to help us get there in the 3rd Berkshire District.
Leigh, you get the next crack at this question for 90 seconds. What's your plan to include or bring Dalton to the fold of the district while recognizing that Dalton's unique?
First of all, I love Dalton. My kids used to play soccer and basketball there. I spent many a time as a mother at the CRA, Wacona Warriors. You guys, hands down, you're a really good team. But I am very, very proud to have received the endorsement of the entire select board in Dalton. And that came about because I spent a lot of time there door knocking, day in and day out. I spent time at the town election, camped out for the day. I went to Dalton Day. One of my fun experiences was door knocking and knocking in the door, and the police chief answered the door, and she says, "We love you. I've already talked to the Great Barrington Police Chief, and how many signs do you have?" And they end up taking 5 signs, and then it turned out that the select board member was married to the police chief, and then it was a whole love fest. And so I guess my experience and my name had made its way to Dalton without even me realizing it. And so since then, I had a kickoff in Dalton, and I've been spending time listening to their plans for a new fire department, whether it's going to be the Dalton garage or a new build or renovate the existing fire station. The police department needs a new home, and there's a lot going on. So I'll finish up in my 30 seconds.
Thank you for respecting the times. I really do appreciate that. And Marybeth, you have half a minute to make your final pitch to Dalton.
Great. So yeah, Dalton's a great community. It's funny, I think we both got the same reaction from the police chief, because she said she really loved me too. So this will be interesting to see how this all goes. I've met several of the select board members, Bob Bishop, Daniel Esco, Joe Deaver. They've all been very kind and very cooperative, and I'm sure that the voters will select the best choice.
There's a lot of love in Dalton. Leigh.
So I will remind you that I received the endorsement of the Dalton Select Board, and that's all the members, including the people that she just named. The stationary factor, I spent 2.5 hours with Steve Sears talking to him about the adaptive reuse of this wonderful industrial site, and talking about his concerns with having vacancies and making it move on. So we're continuing that conversation, and there's so much that Dalton really has to offer.
Thank you. Leigh, this next question goes to you first. More than a year of discussions by the Great Barrington Select Board about what to do about Housatonic Waterworks, and the drinking water discolored by manganese has not yielded progress. Many residents believe that the board's work on this issue has been performative in an attempt to quell the public. The water problem has been growing for at least a decade, and now the waterworks has called on Great Barrington to buy it, but the town could also take it through eminent domain. Why so much delay on this issue? What is the solution? And what do you intend to do about this issue as the state representative for the district if elected?
So the Housatonic Waterworks, for those that are not familiar, it's a private water company, and they serve about 850 customers in Great Barrington, some in West Stockbridge and some in Stockbridge, but the majority are in Housatonic. And this has been a problem for many, many, many years, and for the past 3 years it's gotten considerably worse. We have roily water, we have water that if you take a bath, it's dark brown or black sometimes, that you're afraid to drink it. So it's a very serious problem. People are buying home house filters, and they're turning black within months. And what the select board right now is doing is that we have commissioned a feasibility study from DPC. And this study has taken longer than we expected because the Mercers, who are the ones that operate the HWW, they have been unwilling to give us the financial details that we need to see this feasibility, to see how much it's actually worth, to see what the infrastructure problems are. We are finally going to get that feasibility study, and we're going to present it to the residents in October. Once we have that, we're going to know exactly what it's worth. At that point, we're going to go to the town meeting and say, do you want to spend this much money to acquire this? I'm going to finish my thought and give it to Marybeth.
Go ahead, Marybeth.
We have water in the town of Lenox that's through our enterprise funds. We take a look at that on an annual basis. I would assume that being a select board member, you take a look at everything that your budget concerns on an annual basis. If we had residents that were complaining of water that was unappealing or unattractive or possibly unsafe, carrying possibly carcinogenic products, we would have had it tested, possibly would have done a feasibility study and gone through eminent domain to take the company over in order to make everything safe for our residents. Now, I am not part of the town of Great Barrington, and I cannot pretend to know exactly what they've done or have not done for this issue, but it sounds like they're starting to address it now, and hopefully the residents of Housatonic, West Stockbridge, and Stockbridge will begin to see some improvements with their select board in Great Barrington, starting to take the reins on this particular issue. I feel badly for those residents who've suffered for almost a decade, and I hope that they reach some resolution rather soon.
Leigh, you have.
So this is a two-step problem, right? We have a problem that will take between $30 million and $50 million to rectify this problem. There has not been an investment made in the piping of Housatonic Waterworks. So that's number one, lack of an investment. Number two is that if we were to acquire it, we have to go to town meeting to come up with that appropriation. So whether the Jim Mercer wants $10 million, $5 million, we will know what it's worth once we have this feasibility study. I will say that when Senator Markey came to canvass with me 2 days ago, 3 days ago, I did bring this up, and we were in discussions about a congressional directed funding earmark for that, which will help us purchase that, God willing.
Marybeth, you get a few extra seconds and get the final word on this question.
Okay, so we try to do capital planning in the town of Lenox. I would presume that in your capital plan, you're looking seriously at all of your infrastructure, all of your rolling fleet, all of your municipal buildings, and making plans for stabilization funds or coming up with a bonding plan in order to maintain your infrastructure. That is first and foremost the job of the select board. Hopefully that will become resolved when these guys get their feasibility study done.
Thank you. Let's talk about the rest of River for a moment here. Marybeth, this question goes to you first. So the rest of River cleanup of PCBs from the Housatonic River that runs through this 3rd Berkshire district. The cleanup permit includes a landfill that will be sited in Leigh and result in cleanup activities such as truck traffic throughout the 3rd district. What realistic steps will you advocate for to lessen the impact of placing that landfill in Leigh? And specifically, what will you do to make that happen? If elected, what will be your role in serving all of the constituencies affected by the rest of River cleanup?
Thank you, Kevin. So we have been very active in dealing with this issue since the consent decree went through. The town of Lenox presents letters every time there is a transportation and disposal plan issued by the EPA and GE. The select board reviews that. We have Weston and Sampson, which is our consultant, go over all of the technicalities with us, provide us with a readout of exactly what some of the concerns might be with that plan, and help to educate us. And then we've had public interest focus groups with the public in the town of Lenox to also provide that information to the public. We are advocating for rail transport of the toxic materials out of state to a federally licensed toxic waste facility by rail. We do not want trucks, and also hydraulic pumping of the municipal waste to the upland disposal facility, and we're getting some good traction right now with the EPA, Mass DEP, and General Electric. We anticipate another issuance of the transportation and disposal plan. I believe it's tomorrow evening. There's going to be another meeting. There's going to be time to then reflect on the next plan that GE has turned out, and those comments will be made and return to them in February of 2025.
Leigh, the question goes to you. What steps will you advocate for to lessen the impact of placing that landfill in Leigh, and specifically, what will you do to make that happen? And if elected, what will be your role in serving all of the constituencies affected by the cleanup?
So almost a year ago, in November of 2023, GE presented its transportation plan, and I was there. Not only was I there to witness this travesty, I spoke up, and I was the only select board member in Great Barrington. My opponent was not there, and I believe she was not there. And I fought their transportation plan because at that point, all they were pushing were trucks going down our roads for 13 years. And they had a plan that was very, very hard to see. If you were there, Kathy Hall and Bill, the screening was very hard. And ever since then, I've been attending the PCB Citizen Advisory Committee meetings when I can, listening, talking about independent testing, offering my help as a select board in Great Barrington, being accountable, and really, being there as a Rest of River member of the 5 towns. What we need to do is hold GE accountable to the consent decree, look at the UDF, and make sure that if it is on an aquifer, that it's not going to be poisoning us. If this is going to go ahead, that the dredging is something that, maybe we'll look at emergent technology, such as bioremediation, and we take something that's a bad thing and try to make it into a good thing. Now, there's not anything good about what's happening, but at least we have a chance to be a leader on that.
Marybeth, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Thank you. There was a caveat at the end of your statement, and I can't.
If elected,
what would you do?
What will
Yes.
be your role in serving
Right.
all of the constituencies?
Thank you. So as somebody who used to work with the federal government, I have had contacts with EPA. I do understand how to work with Region 1. And we would be working to, of course, ensure that the most safe mechanisms for transporting the municipal waste from the river to the upland disposal facility would take place, as well as ensuring that anything that went out of state would be done very, very safely.
Leigh, you get a few extra seconds on that.
So when Senator Markey was canvassing with us when he came to endorse my campaign a few days ago, he asked me about what the issues were in the 3rd Berkshire District. Not only did I mention Housatonic Waterworks, but I mentioned Rest of River, and the fact that we need help, that this is something that Leigh cannot shoulder by itself, that the rest of the towns need to be behind it. So again, in my conversations with him on CDS, Congressional Directed Spending, this is something that I'm hoping to help the town of Leigh specifically to help with this compliance plan, whether it's coming up with independent testing or so forth.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Smitty Pignatelli, next question. This question goes to you first, Leigh. Thank you. Smitty Pignatelli recently told State House News Service that in Boston, politicians there count the number of cranes in the air and call that economic development. And out here, he says it's all about horizontal infrastructure, roads, bridges, water, sewer. Those are the things that are going to bankrupt communities if the state doesn't play a larger role in that, he said. Back to my words, it seems everywhere we look, a bridge is declared unsafe and is closed. Bridges are apparently not maintained, and when they do fail, it's a serious transportation and public safety issue. And then the bridges that are closed languish for years awaiting a fix and at astronomical expense. And it appears that the system, the permitting, the bureaucracy, is partly what's, if not wholly, what's preventing speedier fixes to these bridges. And now we have multiple bridge shutdowns, and in Leigh, that's a big issue, and it's put Leigh and the Onyx paper mill into a tough situation, as the Eagle has reported. Because the question is existential, how can the town, for example, in Leigh, facilitate the truck traffic to keep the mill functioning? And what specifically will you do on the state level to fix our bridges and roads? And what will you do to encourage House leadership to take note that we have a horizontal infrastructure challenge here in Berkshire County?
So when I heard about Leigh, I saw that the Massachusetts Director or Department of Transportation accompanied the turning of trucks to get into the mill, and that was something so that they at least temporarily could have a detour that the entire facility could not shut down. So that shouldn't happen, number one, with the bridge going out, but at least they accommodated it with this detour. As we know, what's happening in Great Barrington, Massachusetts is the fourth worst in the nation for poor bridges. 1 in 9 bridge crossings in Massachusetts occur on a structurally deficient bridge. And when I looked deeper into my research, every Berkshire resident lives between 1.7 miles of a structurally deficient bridge. So it's a systemic problem in Massachusetts, and absolutely should the state be stepping up and investing more. We have more roads to maintain here. We have smaller populations, so we have less funding for Chapter 90, and that goes for bridges and roads. With the fair share tax that will be coming up, we're going to have more investment in roads. We're going to have more investment in bridges. So I'm looking forward to that. But the key is to make sure that money comes to Western Mass and doesn't get stuck on the Mass Pike.
Marybeth, the question to you is, what specifically will you do on the state level to fix our bridges and roads, and what will you do to encourage leadership to take note of our horizontal infrastructure problem?
Okay, so I just attended a Mass Municipal Association legislative luncheon a couple of days ago, last week. And everyone there giving the legislative update was so happy to tell us that there was some supplemental funding for rural communities to the tune of $25 million. It costs $1 million to fix one culvert or to lay 1 mile of paved road in the Berkshires. That doesn't go very far. In even the town of Sandusfield alone has 58 miles of roadway. So you're not even covering half the town of Sandusfield. So it's an inadequate amount of money that they're setting aside for rural infrastructure, for horizontal infrastructure. That needs to be changed. I believe that Smitty and Senator Mark I think they got the formula changed for roads to move it more toward miles and less toward population and employment data, so that we are going to start receiving more money here in rural communities, but it probably won't be it's certainly not going to be anytime soon. It's incumbent upon the next 3rd Berkshire District representative to also fight for engineering funds, for more money for mass works. There's $400 million in the new economic development bill if that ever gets passed. Again, that's for 400 bridges.
Thank you. Leigh, your response?
So in Leigh, actually, they were able to get some help through the Accelerated Bridge Replacement Program. And this is something that I'm actually working with the Brookside neighbors immediately, actually right now, to solve the problem that we have right now between this poor neighborhood that's sandwiched between a bridge in Great Barrington and a bridge in Sheffield that is out. So as a state rep, I would be looking into the Accelerated Bridge Replacement Program to see if we qualify.
Marybeth.
It's incumbent upon all towns to develop some kind of a stabilization fund, or at least be aware of the bridges in their town, because towns are responsible for their own bridge maintenance. The town of Lenox has begun a stabilization fund. We've reviewed the 3 bridges that we have that are in satisfactory shape, and we're getting ready to start a stabilization fund at our next town meeting.
Thank you. Let's move on to sharing. In the 3rd Berkshire District, regionalization or shared services continues to be a major challenge, especially for school districts that are facing declining enrollments. And in Great Barrington, where Monument Mountain High faces an increasingly costly renovation or rebuild, so that could be upwards of $150 million, emergency services are also potential candidates for shared services. Do you support regionalization efforts, and in what instances do you support regionalization and shared services, and why? And are there instances in which you do not support sharing services, and why? You've got a minute and a half here.
Okay, I'm very active in the emergency medical services discussion that's going on right now in the 3rd Berkshire District. We're trying to develop a hub and spoke model whereby some of the smaller towns will be getting together in order to find out about times to get to certain places. We're going to have a real data drive to get response times, to find out exactly how much it costs to recruit and retain EMTs, to professionalize the service. So much of these services are staffed by volunteers. Many of these volunteers are aging out. So we're trying to focus on that. The study is, we're doing a study right now that should be completed in the next 12 to 18 months. I think that shared services needs to be looked at with all the various school districts. We try to do shared services with regard to purchasing and facilities development in the town of Lenox. I even think it's important to start thinking about doing shared, we have shared sports teams. We have kids going between Lenox and Leigh to staff a football team, a lacrosse team, and all of that. So these children are engaged together right now. Maybe we should be thinking about sharing schools when our schools are starting to decline, and that's going to be a very costly endeavor with the decline in population that we're facing here in the county.
Thank you. Leigh, do you support regionalization efforts, and in what instances do you support them, and why? And are there instances when you do not support shared services, and why?
So I want to clarify one item going back to what Marybeth has mentioned a few times about capitalization and stabilization funds. Lenox is just starting to have their capital stabilization fund. In Great Barrington, we've had one since 2019, and we have $1.5 million in it. And so I just want to point that out, first of all, that we have been very, very fruitful in putting money aside for capital stabilization. I am a big supporter of regionalization. We're getting older as a population. We're losing our youth, and we cannot keep acting in a vacuum and acting in silos, and we need each other. And especially when you look at a district that's so spread out, such as a 3rd Berkshire district, we need to rely on separate towns. And there's cost savings to be made when you do regionalization and shared services. So I think that we need to be smart about this, and we need to be realistic. And I know that sometimes it's very hard to kind of give your town, whether it's a school, whether it's sharing someone in your HR department. But we need to be realistic about where we are. And if it comes down to saving taxpayers' money and through regionalization, I think that's something that we should deeply look into that.
Thank you. Marybeth, you get 30 seconds to chime in on this. There we go. I'm doing pretty good so far. Yeah, this is good. Hey, I also want to give, thank you. I guess that was just my own personal self-reassurance there coming out. Thank you for commiserating. I also want to point out that we have some wonderful folks who are in the booth here at Shakespeare who are running the sound, and they're making this work and look quite lovely. So thank you to them. We still have time for the 30-second response to you, Marybeth, and the 30 seconds back to Leigh on this. Shared services.
Oh, okay. Shared services. So I would consider just about everything on the table when it comes to shared services. I mentioned EMS. Our fire departments are also, they have a very large contingent of volunteers. That's going to be one of the next things that we're going to have to look at potentially. The Berkshire House of Corrections is soon to be the Berkshire Dispatch Center. There have been 7 dispatchers throughout South County, and those are going to consolidate in about 2 or 3 weeks. So
thank you,
that's a
Marybeth.
good shared service.
Thank you. Leigh.
So our EMS is struggling, our emergency medical services. So whether it's the EMT, paramedics, and it's incumbent on us to help them. I'm part of the same EMS task force that Smitty started, the hub and spoke model, and we are looking at regionalization. Not only with that, we're going to the legislature to look at a bill that would make EMS an essential service. So this is part of what I am very, very dedicated to, and this involves regionalization.
All right, I think we have time for 2 more questions, and then
Only 2?
only 2 more questions. I have more.
I mean, you know, your fingers are practically bleeding with this over here.
And then we'll go to closing arguments. Sound good? All right. Leigh, this question goes to you. Last year, Great Barrington Police and Berkshire Hills Regional School District administrators responded to a report that the book Genderqueer, one of the most targeted banned books in the United States, was on the shelf in a middle school classroom. The situation sparked debate over what is appropriate reading for young students, as well as community outrage that a police officer would enter a classroom in response to a complaint about educational materials or allegations against a teacher. Do you support that book being in the classroom, and how will you respond to future calls for investigations of books or of teachers of the classrooms in public schools? Leigh, this question goes to you.
So book banning should not happen, number one, straight out. I absolutely support that book being in the school. This is something that we need for our students, especially for those that are feeling that their voices are not heard, that they are struggling with identity issues. So number one, I'm fully supportive of the teacher having this book. When this happened, the first thing I did was call Chief Storty, and I said, I want to meet with you privately. I want to hear directly from you what happened. And that's exactly what I did. I sat down in an office for an hour, and he showed me his regulations. He explained that it was 2-tier, that there was 2 complaints, and the reason why they investigated, because one of the complaints involved this person saying that the teacher had a child on her lap. And if it wasn't part of that, they wouldn't have gone in. But because of this was part of the complaint, they felt they had a duty to investigate. Now, when I talked to him and looked in his eyes, I felt that that was the truth. Now, this is something that obviously there were a lot of dropped balls, and I think that between the superintendent and the police chief, we have a lot of learning to do, and the town. So unfortunately, this was an incident that should have never happened. The teacher should have been supported. The students should have been supported. They lost a teacher for many, many, many months, and absolutely should never be a book banned. I think it was just an issue that fell between the cracks and should never, ever happen again.
Thank you, Leigh. And the question goes to you, Marybeth. The questions are: do you support the book being in the classroom, and how will you respond to future calls for the investigations of books or teachers in public school classrooms?
I support there being a policy in the school, as in the library, to evaluate a book, any book that comes into the system. Is it appropriate to be in the library? Is it appropriate to be, is it a representative of what this community values? Specifically, if you're in a high school library or a middle school library, there should be a policy to vet each book. Now, this book was in a classroom, so I don't know if it was the teacher's book or the school's book, but there should just be a policy, and that is the first thing to fall back on when reviewing any material. I also think that the school district and the school superintendent should have been notified first. It's their building. They're their policies that are being challenged or at issue. And so, having a policeman come into a school building to do that review, I would anticipate that the police officer would have first gone to the superintendent to communicate with the superintendent, and then conduct their search accordingly. There should be a chain of command. It is the building, and the building principal should have been involved. The building supervisor is the building principal, and a policeman coming in should be first going to the principal of that building.
Leigh, you have 30 seconds.
So the police did notify the principal and the superintendent. They knew straight away what was happening, and they allowed this police officer, not in uniform, to come after the school was closed. So number one, they were notified. The superintendent and the principal did allow for the police to come in. So that's very, very important to know that.
Marybeth, you get 30 seconds.
The town of Lenox has library policies for our public library, for the review of books, any book that goes into the public library, as well as any book that comes into the high school, middle school library. There are specific sections that are sort of geared toward middle schoolers and high schoolers. I don't know where that book may end up, if it is a part of our collection, but I would presume that it would be evaluated by the librarian and
Thank
our
you.
current policy.
Thank you, Marybeth. Appreciate that. And let's move on to our final question for time, please. And this question goes to Marybeth first. And it is this. The recently passed Affordable Homes Act contains provisions regarding both funding and regulatory relaxations, such as overriding certain local restrictions on ADUs or accessory dwelling units to boost housing unit production in Massachusetts. And while advocates will always push for more funding, obviously it's needed, are there other sensible opportunities to loosen state regulations in order to boost housing production? And what additional solutions do you have to increase the access to quality and affordable housing in the Berkshires?
Okay, great. I believe the first thing that we also need to look at is the stretch code. I know that the town of Lenox has adopted the stretch code, and that can sort of put a developer into a position where they have to really put a lot of money into a project. That could potentially be relaxed on a town-by-town basis. So if there could be some relaxation of the stretch code, if we can use the Mass Works money, which is effective in helping provide horizontal infrastructure, water and sewer. Again, I mentioned that there's supposed to be a $400 million Mass Works grant in the economic development bill. If that gets passed, that will be extremely helpful in putting in new housing development anywhere. There also is going to be siting of new developments in smaller places like Otis and Sandusfield and Mount Washington, if they would like to develop smaller infill projects for affordable home ownership or new rental projects that are, say, 6, 8s, or 10s. Not water and sewer, but Title V should be looked at to group Title Vs for smaller projects, and that could be an affordable way to get some new housing installed.
Leigh, the question was, are there other sensible opportunities to loosen state regulations to boost housing production here in Massachusetts? And what additional solutions do you have to increase the access to quality and affordable housing here in the Berkshires? You have 90 seconds.
So we need to address housing affordability and housing availability. And there's two ways of looking at it. There's many ways, actually. Zoning is a problem. We need to release and relax the zoning laws, whether it's by right ADUs, which is included in the Affordable Homes Act, which Great Barrington has already had by right ADUs, expanding more opportunities for first-time home buyers to access money, having rental assistance. So we have a supply and demand issue, and there's not enough housing. We have a 0% rental vacancy rate in Great Barrington. The area median income in Great Barrington is around $74,000 for one person. They can afford maybe a $250,000 house. The average home in South County right now, according to the third quarter of the Berkshire Realtors Market Watch is $846,000. So think about that. There's almost a $600,000 gap right now between what an average person is that's making a South County salary and what is going in South County right now. So there's a disconnect right there. I'm always looking at other communities to see what they're doing, and this has led me to testify twice for the Affordable Homes Act, and for the governor to tap me to be there when she announced the Affordable Homes Act in Pittsfield.
Thank you. Marybeth, you have 30 seconds to respond.
So the town of Lenox has helped 17 first-time home buyers with a first-time home buyer program. We've just increased that the amount to assist from $10,000 to $20,000. We've just won $1 million community development block grant allocation from the state to improve owner-occupied housing, to help people decarbonize by putting in possibly a new heat pump, a new roof, a new furnace. We've got an emergency rental assistance program available to people who are in crisis. So there are an awful lot of ways that the town of Lenox currently helps folks, and that I would look to do.
Want a couple?
So I work in housing. My full-time job is housing. So I take calls every single day of people living in cars, living in tents, needing sleeping bags. This is my full-time job, is housing. I also am the chair of the select board, the housing subcommittee, which is a subcommittee between planning board and the select board. So again, I'm focused on housing. I go to the state house and I take my concerns and I testify in front of the legislature about housing and bringing money back to the 3rd Berkshire District. So I am immersed in this on a daily basis. I'm not just sitting on a board. I'm actually working day in and day out in housing.
We're in overtime, and I think Marybeth, you get a 30 more seconds. Do you? Was that? That was okay. Yeah, sorry. I was doing good. Well, sorry. Listen, I want to thank you all. We've reached the end of the time that we have available for questions. We got through, I think, a dozen questions, and I think the answers were well reasoned, and I think will help a lot of folks help them come to a decision about who to vote for on November 5th. Once again, I want to thank you all for attending the Berkshire Eagle debate. Don't go anywhere, because we're still going to do 2 minutes of closing arguments here. And I do want to thank Shakespeare and Company, and I do want to thank Community Television for the Southern Berkshires. And you know what? Let's give them a round of applause. You've been wonderful and fantastic, and I really, really think that we've had a really good night tonight. And I am setting my timer for 2 minutes here. And because of that coin flip, Leigh won, and she opted to give the closing arguments last. So that means Marybeth gets to give her closing arguments first. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, and your 2 minutes will start now.
Okay, so thank you all for joining us this evening, and thanks to Kevin Moran and the Berkshire Eagle. I plan to represent you at the State House, the largest and most diverse district in Massachusetts. My experience spans decades of working in the military and the federal government, in our government, locally, and in our schools, and I've delivered real results. I've fought for affordable housing. Brushwood Farms is in site prep due to my significant persistence. I've worked to boost our local economy, working at Mass Hire, through the Lenox Cultural District, and with the Lenox Chamber of Commerce. I've stood up for community mental health services as a member of the Breen Center Board for 6 years. I know how to get things done. I have a track record. And as an independent, I'm not tied to party politics. I'm tied to you, the people of this district, and that is who I will serve. As a professional, I believe in actions over words, collaboration over conflict, and results over promises. As the 3rd Berkshire District deserves a representative who will fight for every town and every person. That's what I'm here to do. So I'm asking for your vote tonight to continue to work for a stronger, more vibrant Berkshires. Let's build it together.
Leigh, you have 2 minutes for your closing.
Should I stand up? Okay. So thank you very, very much for your engagement and for letting us take your evening here. So you've heard a little bit in the 75 minutes about what I've brought to this district, and I'm going to leave you with 3 items to think about when you go home tonight. Number 1, I'm someone that gets things done. I am doing the job of a rep right now in many ways. I work day in and day out in constituent services through my role at Construct, through my role as chair of the select board in the planning board subcommittee, through my work being a parent, being a solo parent, and knowing what it's like to put kids through childcare, to pay for college, to look at and address mental health issues. You know, I've been there, I've experienced it. So number 1, I'm someone that gets the job done. The House leadership recognizes that the governor represents and sees this in my work, and my record speaks for itself. From being director of development at Eagle Mill, bringing in millions of dollars in funding and historic tax credits in Leigh for an historic paper mill, to creating and leading an innovative workforce housing model at the Windflower in Great Barrington, to devising a short-term rental bylaw that creates long-term housing for folks in Great Barrington. So these are actually things I brought to the table. Number 2, I understand the Berkshire experience. As I mentioned, I came here with nothing. I moved here from Ireland and I turned a struggle into success. I opened an errand service business. I put 3 kids through school, and now I'm director of communications at the largest nonprofit affordable housing in the Southern Berkshires.
Thank you.
Lastly, my values speak for themselves, and the
Thank you,
endorsement speaks for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, November 5th, go vote. There's no excuse not to. I want to thank Fred Ruppberg, publisher of the Berkshire Eagle, tonight, too. He asked for and he got this debate. Have a safe drive home, everybody. Good night.